afternoon and welcome to the Monday, May 8th, 2009 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. We'll now call this meeting to order. The first order of business will be our City Council staff report with updates by Deborah A. Owen, City Clerk.
Thank you and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Just a reminder that next week, next Monday, there will be no joint City Minnehaha County meeting that has been canceled. So there'll be informational and then the 7 o'clock, but no joint meeting on June 15th. In addition, on June 22nd, there are no meetings for that night, as there are 5 Mondays in June. There is no meeting on Monday, June 22nd. Then to remind you all, there will be a tour at the end of the month, the informational, a tour with a presentation preceding that, which will talk about our records retention program and our records retention center. I think that was requested by Councilmember Knudsen, and we are looking forward to talking to you about that program and how it's progressed with the records rolling into that center. And then the Municipal League has the elected officials workshop. I know a number of you have gone. This is a very good workshop. If you've not attended that, put on by Yvonne Taylor, and she has various guests. Chris Nelson, Secretary of State, usually Attorney General Larry Long attends as well and talks about open meetings. And we'll have legislative audit talk about budgets and how that works. It's going to give you a basic understanding of city government from a very 30,000-foot level, so it's usually an enjoyable afternoon. That is July 10th at the Ramcota in Pier. For those of you who want to go, just let Jamie know, and she'll register you for that. It's a one-day, so it's kind of an up and back, and not a lot of time. And then finally, as you know, there was an email sent out. I think Tamara had sent it, attending a workshop at the IIMC, looking at the protocols for public input, and other cities have had issues when perhaps a citizen will talk about their name and then give their personal street address. And there's some other cases out there where those citizens have been then targets by other members of the public, and looking at perhaps just changing our own protocol so they simply say they're a resident of the City of Sioux Falls, and then they can write and fill out a sign-in sheet when they come in to let us know who they are so we can spell their names correctly and all of that, but that they wouldn't identify where they live, so that they may not be a target in the future. And I just wanted to provide that for you in hard copy at the request of Council Member Litz. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of Deborah? Mr. Jameson.
So are we going to change that procedure? Did I hear that right for the public input? We're going to change that? Or do we need to vote on it?
Well, I think, just all of you come to agreement. I think it's certainly reasonable, but I have heard back from some of you and not others, and the mayor, I think, would want to weigh in on that too, and then the city attorney's office. But I think it's probably a pretty easy fix to make sure that we're protecting the citizens if there were those who would disagree, and then unfortunately take it out on that citizen down the road.
Yeah, Greg, my intent was simply to bring up the subject and have some public discourse on it here, maybe at this informational.
You want to talk about it right now, Bob?
Well, I think what I had in mind was maybe if we waited till the open discussion, then I was going to bring it up. Very good. Okay, there's a lot of staff here. Is anybody here for the mayor's office? Very good. How about audit committee?
No report.
Fiscal committee?
The fiscal committee met last week, and we had 2 assignments from that came out of the community forums that we held. And the first one was regarding economic development, and we heard a plan by Slater Barr from the Development Foundation about a community-wide strategic planning research project that they are about to undertake, and it through the Development Foundation and the City of Sioux Falls and other participants, they hope to get that underway later in the year. It'll probably take I assume about a year to get completed, but it did involve a funding portion to the city or from the city, or request from the city to help fund it, and I believe through conversations with the mayor's office that that's going to happen.
Questions of Pat?
And I should also say the other part of that was the other item was talking about the discretionary tax abatement formula, and we are looking for input from the Chamber's Tax Issues Committee. Is going to do a little research into that and get back to us as well.
I saw that we had an email from Planning, Jeff Schmidt, that talked about the tax increment financing or whatever program we've got here in our bid district, as well as Pettigrew Heights, and there was some information on that. But I did request some more information pertaining to that email, as I didn't understand exactly what was the numbers all meant to us. So maybe as that comes up, that will shed some light on that as well.
I think, if I might, that was the discretionary tax abatement stuff that happens in the downtown and Pettigrew area as it is. This was what was talked about in the community forums was more of a discretionary tax abatement for the entire community concerning a number of different areas to include single-family lots, commercial projects, and other.
I understood what that intent was, but I thought that if we had information on what we are currently offering for discretionary form of that may aid us in talking about the future. So, questions of Pat? Very good. Land Use Committee?
No report.
No report. Public Services Committee?
No report.
No report from Kenny. Okay, now comes part number 8, the City Council open discussion. Are there any topics for discussion today? Councilor Knudsen?
It's just a promotion for the Orpheum Theater. Once again, over Father's Day weekend on June 19th, 20th, and 21st, the USD Playhouse is bringing up Man of La Mancha. And a person, if they're interested in getting tickets for the evening performances on Friday or Saturday or Sunday afternoon, they should call 677-5400. And then the only other thing is I'd like to publicly wish Constable Costello a happy birthday. Tomorrow I tried to talk him into a dance lesson with me tomorrow afternoon, and he claims his wife has a conflict, which I think is a rather creative excuse.
So, 29, yes, indeed. Well, you know, Deborah brought up this thing that I read, and most of us probably read it on our emails about the instances of, certain citizens coming to the podium and being identified as to where they live, and a very easy way to, to cancel that out or, take them out of danger. And I guess the idea sort of interested me. I don't know that we are there yet as a city, and we've went through some security measures for counselors also here recently, but I thought the idea merited some discussion, and I guess I'm interested in what my fellow counselors might think about a few simple changes here that wouldn't compromise the integrity of the whole system. Councilor Jamieson.
Change it. Sounds good to me.
Well, you should just say what's on your mind, Greg. Councilor Knudsen.
I'm very comfortable with changing it also. I do think it would be helpful for the clerk's office to have people sign in over there at the podium and, for minutes reasons, taking minutes reasons and so forth. But on the other hand, I suppose even continuing that would, that would make the addresses public. So, if a person, wanted to see them and they were in the room, they obviously could go over to the podium and look at the address. So, that's not a great answer, but it would be helpful for taking minutes, so whatever.
Councilor Brown.
I'm fine with changing it as well.
Okay, Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little concerned here about taking away some of the spontaneity that might exist out there, because you might have some people coming in without any clear intent to testify, and then they hear somebody say something and they get real excited and so forth. And now, creating that uncertainty, if we say, well, you've got to have signed in and so forth, I'm afraid it's going to cut down on some spontaneity.
Actually, it could if they didn't know. They can sign up after they're done. We just want to make sure we get their names spelled correctly. That's what helps us a lot. And sometimes the address for us helps us look up to verify if the name is spelled correctly if they didn't sign in. But I think in the interest of, as you can see some of these cases, somebody complaining about a barking dog and then somebody go pull out a gun at their house and shoot them. That's obviously way out of the norm, but it is happening in certain parts of the country. So just if they could even write their names, we could actually record it correctly would be helpful.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't mind if we would maybe after each time somebody testifies to say, just a reminder, would you please sign in?
Sure.
So that we don't have to have people concerned, well, I didn't really sign in,
Right.
so maybe I better not say anything.
Right. No, I agree with that. That's fine.
Mr. Costello.
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not sure that everybody signs in now. So maybe if we had the sign-in sheet right at the podium, then people could come up and sign in and speak their piece at that time.
Ms. Knudsen.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good improvement also, because actually we've had the podium there with the sign-in sheet for several years. So but we've never said to anyone. We've never made it as far as making it more uncomfortable for people speaking. I don't believe that will happen just because we haven't said to people, "Are you signed in?" We've never ever done that, and we've had the system in place forever. over there. So I think this could all be worked out very, very well for everyone involved.
Well, since we have a lot of positives and no negatives, can I direct the city clerk's office to implement these changes then? Would that be a...
Sure.
All right, I see a lot of nods. Kenny? Yeah, Kenny's good too. Okay, well, Deborah, there you have it. So,
Thank you.
Tamara can change the way we do business down here. Anything else here for open? Councilor Staggers?
Tonight we have item number 14, which is a resolution levying the front footage tax. Now, in the resolution, of course, it says fee, but assessment fee, but it's really a tax. I guess one concern I have is that with the resolution, we only have one reading, then we vote. When we have a formal tax increase, at least we have 2 readings. And since this is really a tax, I guess I was thinking about letting the Public Works Department present tonight, and then after that, just ask for a deferral until next week, so that in effect, we could have a second reading on this. So I'm going to present that motion, and if anybody would like to second it, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Very good.
Point of order. It's not a tax increase. It just is the same amount. So I don't know that tax increase is in order.
Yeah, but if we don't pass it, then we have a tax. What we do is we renew this tax every year. And so people are not even aware of this, that this is on the agenda tonight. So.
But whether it's a fee or a tax, I don't want to get caught up in those semantics, but it's not an increase. It's the same amount as it was last year.
Yeah, but once again, if we don't pass this, we have no tax then. So in effect, we're passing the tax. We're renewing the tax.
Well, if Mr. Staggers, you can get a second tonight, more power to you. Mr. Brown, you look like you were about to say something, no? Okay, no. Well, Kermit's tipped his hand to us here, so.
Oh, no, I try to let you know what I anticipate doing here.
Very good.
So, I think it's just, very appropriate. And I do wonder why we don't have that in an ordinance instead of just a resolution. I think it's more appropriate to have an informal ordinance.
Any other items for the greater good here? Very good. Seeing nobody speak up, we're going to get into item number 9, our presentations. And the first thing is by Kevin Smith, our Assistant Director of Public Works. It's the Integrated Resource Plan. And with him is Adam Graff from Heartland Consumers Power Distribution and Mike Burkhardt, the Light Superintendent. So, gentlemen, have at it.
Good afternoon, Kevin Smith with the Office of Public Works. You should have in front of you a copy of the Integrated Resource Plan, or the IRP. Along with that, you should have a small brochure about Heartland Consumers Power District. Inside that folder is a hard copy of today's presentation. As we mentioned at agenda briefing last week, the Integrated Resource Plan is a requirement on the City of Sioux Falls to be produced every 5 years because we are customers of the Western Area Power Administration. Adam will speak in a moment about the information that's included in the IRP. In years past, the city has prepared it internally. Within the last 5 years, we've become customers of Heartland Consumers Power District, and this is now a service they provide to us at no extra charge, is actual preparation of the plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to give you a short presentation on the contents of the IRP, why we need to do it, and then give you all time to ask me some questions. As Kevin stated, the Integrated Resource Plan is a requirement from Western Area Power Administration for all customers that have hydropower allocations from the federal dams. It is required that an Integrated Resource Plan is submitted every 5 years, and there are also an annual reporting requirement where things like load forecasts and actual load values and updates to the plan are submitted annually. That's also provided as a service by Heartland to its customers. Heartland created an Integrated Resource Plan cooperative in 1997 to help our customers meet these IRP requirements. Basically, WAPA allows us to create a cooperative among our members or our customers to submit these reports on their behalf as a group, which is a nice feature for our customers. It kind of unloads some of the administrative duties from them, and us being the supplemental or full requirements power supplier to our customers puts us in a good position to make these submittals. Heartland has submitted these annual reports submitted the plans and the annual reports on a 5-year basis since the inception of the cooperative in 1997. The current Integrated Resource Plan cooperative consists of 3 Heartland customers, the City of Sioux Falls, of course, along with the cities of Madison and Volga. There's also a small customer plan cooperative that Heartland administers on behalf of some of its smaller customers, and the cutoff is based on annual energy sales. And the values, obviously, Sioux Falls, Madison, and Volga are above those. So the only difference in the plan, there's a little more stringent requirements on an annual basis on what's reported of the larger customers. So that's the reason for the split. The main components of these reports you have in front of you are historical load information for the Heartland customers as an aggregate group and also for each customer individually. There's a load forecast where we're forecasting power demand and energy usage out into the future through the resource planning period. There are also supply-side and demand-side resource summaries, which basically supply-side resources cover all of our power plants, basically, the resources we use to supply power to you and the rest of our customers. Demand-side resources are programs such as load management, energy efficiency, other ways that through reduction or optimization of energy usage we can supply this energy to our customers. And then the final main component is the action plan, which just lays out the tasks that Heartland and its customers plan to undertake over the 5-year planning period as far as operations of the utilities, programs to implement on the supply side, and also on the demand side, things like energy efficiency, which you can read about more in the action plan. I just want to hit on a couple of the more important graphs that are part of this report. This one here is total energy forecast for Heartland's aggregate customer group. It also contains historical information from 2000 through 2008, actual information, and going forward as a projection. And just interesting to see that we're obviously forecasting a rise in energy usage throughout the planning period. Although that seems to be moderating from historical levels, we still see an increase in energy usage. This is the same type of information, but on a demand basis, which is basically peak power usage, an aggregate of all our customers. Historical to 2008, looking out projected through 2015. We have 2 lines here, the red being the actual demand that we're forecasting by our customers, the green being the reserve that we're required to hold. Basically, we're required to carry 15% above our projected demand in capacity to supply, and that's required by the regional planning committees, and we must comply to that, or we'll face penalties. So basically, it just heightens the resources we need to have. What this plot is projected demand, which is the last plot you saw on the red and green lines, laid on top of a bar chart of Heartland's resources. Well, actually, Heartland and our customers' resources. You'll see the bottom blocks, the blue, represent our customers' aggregate WAPA allocations, and then the blocks on top represent different resources that Heartland either owns or purchases, including some coal facilities. Our current resource mix includes coal-fired generation, nuclear generation, wind, and we have short-term market purchases that could be a mix of any of those, including natural gas and diesel-fired. This is the same sort of graph on an energy basis, which is just basically the number of megawatt hours or kilowatt hours used in a year by our customers and our resources stacked on top of those. On this, both this and the previous graph, the only things I'd like to point out is that Heartland is in a favorable position as far as resources go. We're projecting surpluses in all the planning period years on an energy basis, and I'll just flip back to the last slide. On a demand basis, we're showing slight shortages in 2010 and 2014, where you can see that fuchsia block on top showing a short-term market purchase where Heartland has to go out and gain a power supply to make up the difference. But for 2010, those purchases are in place, and for 2014, they will be in the near future. The demand-side resource summary of the Integrated Resource Plan contains information about current customer programs, including load management and energy efficiency programs, and a summary of a DSM potential study that Heartland had done on behalf of its customers in late 2008, and an overview of Heartland's energy efficiency and DSM program that is currently being implemented as part of the results of that study. This action plan details operation plans for the next 5 years and details on the energy efficiency and demand-side management plans. And the submittal of the Integrated Resource Plan is due to WAPA on June 15th of 2009. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions of Adam? Mr. Staggers?
Yeah, you mentioned that this report will then go to WAPA, and then after that, does it go to the Corps of Army Engineers, or do you know what happens?
No, what WAPA does is the whole reason the Integrated Resource Plan program was created in, I believe, 1992, an Energy Policy Act by the Federal Congress required WAPA to make certain reports available to the federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers, and as part of that, WAPA created this Integrated Resource Plan as a mechanism for them to gather that information from their customers and then submit that data on. So this report will get submitted to WAPA and approved or not by WAPA. We'll go through that process, obviously. And once WAPA compiles all the resource plans on an annual basis, it submits different reports onto federal agencies, the Army Corps, and that kind of stuff. So, yes, this data is used for long-term energy forecasting on a regional and national basis.
Adam, I have a question here. It's mostly just curiosity. In 2003 to 2004, you ramped up quite a bit. What event took place that caused that jump?
On an energy?
I don't know. It was in your history and then on your use chart there.
Okay, yeah. Most of that growth is attributed to added customers. We added multiple customers in that calendar year, so just increased our overall energy usage there.
What do you see for the future of nuclear power?
Right now, the regulatory conditions on nuclear power, they aren't promoting it very much. I think it really depends on where carbon legislation goes in the future. This would be my personal opinion, but I don't see any way we fill the gap of the energy needed and reduce the carbon emissions like everyone would like to see without use of all the technologies we have on hand, which includes nuclear. But right now, the regulatory process as it is just not feasible.
I agree with you. I was on a nuclear-powered ship that went all over the world and has never had an accident in the 40 years it's been in service. And I guess I wait for us to get back on track with nuclear power. So, any other questions of Adam? Mr. Anderson.
Adam, I see part of your energy forecast is with wind energy, and you have a plant, or I guess a farm up in Wessington Springs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you done any type of construction around metropolitan areas?
As far as wind development?
Yes.
No. Our only wind development is the Wessington Springs facility. There's a few of our customers that have community-owned wind towers that are in or near city limits. Heartland is not a direct. We don't purchase that. It's something the cities have in place. But no, Heartland as a group has not invested in any urban wind development.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else for Adam? Very good, Adam. Thank you for that information. Is there anything else?
No, I will be on hand for the meeting at 7 p.m.
Okay.
if you have any additional questions.
Very good. I see Mike Burkhardt, your name is on here too. Are you going to give a presentation?
No, Adam did the presentation. He knows all about it. So.
Very good. All right. Thank you. See, Part B of our presentation is going to be our annual rate review and proposed rate adjustments. And Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works, with Kevin Smith, who's the Assistant Director of Public Works, and Steve Burian from AE2 Engineering is going to visit with us again. So, gentlemen, have at it.
Good afternoon, City Council. We've got a large list of people that you'll hear from tonight in addition of what you just mentioned, Councilor Letts. To start off, though, to give some appropriate introduction to the team, each year for the past 3 years we've conducted an analysis of the enterprise funds and brought them together as a package for you so you can see the entire effect on the enterprise funds one time. We also do this as a key step ahead of the budget presentation, so when you get and see the full budget presentations, the revenues and expenses that are reflected in those have also gone through the detailed rate analysis that you'll see tonight. Tonight we will present to you in the following order, which will be water reclamation, water purification, light and power, sanitary landfill, and we'll also highlight the procedural step in this presentation as well as item 14 tonight for Councilor Stagger's questions that recognizes that there's a resolution that's required as a part of the current ordinance that's in place as it relates to the frontage fee. The work that you'll hear tonight has been a combined effort of the Finance Department, the Public Works Department, and who we believe are the top rate review consultants in the region. AE2S will present to you two of the items, DGR and RW Beck. This year's analysis stays consistent with cost of service based approach. These enterprise funds are not supported by the general fund and have to recover their costs through rates. Simply stated, the revenue received that is received from the rates go back into these respective funds to operate and also maintain the systems and expand as needed. The cost of service-based approach in the annual analysis allows us to recommend to you the minimum rate increase that's needed to continue to operate the enterprise operations and also over respective time meet responsible reserve levels. One of the key aspects to the analysis this year is that we have adjusted growth rates to be more in line with the economic times, but also some of the things that we're starting to see through the customers on conservation basis, whether it's from the water department or from the landfill department. We're starting to adjust those annual analysis because we are seeing conservation efforts really pay dividends. The presenters tonight, most are familiar faces to you. The people you will see first is Steve Burrion with AE2S, and he'll present water reclamation. He'll be assisted by Trent Lubers. He's the division manager of water reclamation. Last year, if you recall, the projection in 2009 for 2010 was a 16% rate increase, and the analysis tonight you'll see stays consistent with a 16% rate increase. Then Steve will move into water purification. He'll be assisted by Randy Jansen, the water division manager. The projection back in 2009 for water purification was to recommend a 14% rate increase, and the analysis again stays consistent this year with 14% rate increase. Chad Rasmussen, a new face for DGR, Blair Metzger, that normally does it on family vacation, and so he will present tonight. Light and Power, he'll be assisted by Mike Burkhart. Mike is the Light and Power division manager. Last year, the projection for 2010 was to recommend a rate increase of 4%. This year's analysis has that recommendation at 5%. Matt Evans with RW Beck will present the sanitary landfill rate analysis. He'll be assisted by Dave McElroy. Dave is the landfill division manager. The projection in 2009 for 2010 was to recommend to raise tipping fees by $1 per ton. You'll see, based on some favorable revenue events, and we've been also able to take advantage of accelerating the landfill gas project, that we are not recommending to raise landfill rates for 2010. And finally, Galen Huber, again, will highlight the procedural step that's needed annually to enact the frontage fee. The recommended rate increases for water reclamation, water purification, and light and power would be effective January 1. Again, we do this mid-year and ahead of the budget presentations to make sure that you are fully aware that the analysis has been completed and that the revenue and expenses have been vetted through detailed rate models. We hope the presentations tonight answer your questions. If not, we will obviously do our best at the end to address them. And so without any further delay, let's get started. We'll first ask Steve Burrian with AE2S and Trent Lubers to start.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I will be giving the brunt of the presentation, and Trent is flanking me, as Mark put it, in the event that you have detailed questions about his capital improvements plan or his budget. He's much better versed in terms of the details of that. If we follow along with the presentation that you have in front of you, we did complete an initial detailed rate study for the City of Sioux Falls Water Reclamation Division back in 2006. When we talk about rate studies, it usually can consist of two significant components. One is the revenue adequacy process, and this is the...
We don't have the presentation in front of us. Was there a handout?
Oh, I guess I'm sorry, maybe it may have to be... Sorry. Should I hold up? All right. I think they're bringing the presentation for you. I'm sorry. The revenue adequacy process is really the process that you're used to every year, where you put a budget together and make sure that the revenue that you have is equal to the revenue requirements that you have. But in terms of revenue adequacy, we usually look out 5 or 10 years in the future to complete that analysis. The other component is the cost of service analysis that Mark indicated. In addition to a full cost recovery, we also want to look at what the causative elements are of the different user classes across your system, and then make sure that those user classes have rates that are reflective of those causative elements. In terms of developing rate goals, then, along with those two components, we certainly want to maintain sufficient revenue to meet the needs of the utility, and we also want to make sure that the rates that you have are equitable across all user classes. And so what you've asked us to do, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity, is to help you on an annual basis to update the model based on the actual 2008 performance, the budget you had for 2009, the budget for 2010, and then in this case another 4-year planning process beyond that particular period. In terms of looking back at 2008, which I would think it's important to come before you when I make this presentation and let you know how we did in the previous year, we have a side-by-side bar chart comparison. All of the blue reflects what was projected for 2008. All of the red reflects what was actually happened in 2008. And you can see in this case, in all cases, the red was a little bit less than the blue. For revenue, obviously that's a bad thing, and it primarily had to do on the operating fund from a little bit less water use, which is the meter that you use to account for your water reclamation, as well as a little bit of a shortfall in terms of industrial strength. On the other income side, which is a much bigger number, that had to do with the East Side Sanitary Sewer funds, and those funds not coming in as quickly as you anticipated. So in response to that, you can see that the Water Reclamation Division reacted appropriately and was very prudent in the way that they managed their operating expenses. And because the capital outlays were already programmed, that came in very close to the process. And so the net effect of those different balances was that you saw a slight increase in the unrestricted cash balance for last year when you combine all of those aspects of things. So moving on then to 2010, the next step that we had to do was to update the model to reflect where we're going in the future. The first thing we always do is to take the budget that you have, or the preliminary budget you have for 2010 for both operating and capital, and put that into the plan. In this case, there was a major change made for the satellite treatment plant land purchase. It was decided that instead of bonding that we would do that through cash, which was a pretty big impact to the utility. When I say current cost recovery projections, what I'm indicating there is that we did go in there and update those cost recovery projections based on the performance in 8. And so when we saw that there was some underfunding there, we did adjust all of those cost recoveries to make them more reflective of the current patterns within the city. The City of Sioux Falls was pretty fortunate to get some stimulus dollars, and so we added 3 SRF loans related to stimulus. That particular program has a 10% principal reduction. They didn't want to use the grant word, so they came up with a different term for that. The net effect for Sioux Falls is about a $1.4 million savings. And then we did add Harrisburg as a new user to the rate model. I think they'll be on in 2010, where we started carrying them as a new user class. And then the 2009 revenue projections were adjusted based on 2008 actual figures. And what I mean by that is that when I showed you the revenue for 8 falling short of what the revenues were projected to be for 8, we didn't just blindly proceed with the projections for 9. We did go in and adjust those accordingly to take the latest and greatest information that was available. This then is the recommended rate increases. Mark quoted the specific residential rates. Obviously, you have a much more complicated user base than just residential. And so shown on here is residential, commercial, domestic industrial, which are the ones that don't have high-strength waste, and then the HS industrial are those that do have the high strength. And you can see the increases range from 16% up to 20%. And this is based on that cost of service analysis that we did back in 2006 that shows what the cost-causative elements are from those user classes. Over to the right then, you can see the resulting meter charges and flow charges either in per meter or per 100 cubic feet or per 1,000 gallons for each of the user classes shown in this table. Switching over to some of the other elements of your wastewater utility, you do charge for strength. BOD, total TSS, and TKN are all acronyms that reflect the strength of your wastewater. One is the organic strength, one is the amount of solids in the wastewater, and one is the amount of nitrogen in there. Grease speaks for itself. And you can see that those are all being increased at a rate of 18% as proposed for 2010 based on the cost of service analysis. Then you do have 4 wholesale customers within Sioux Falls: Prairie Meadows, Renner, Brandon, and Harrisburg. And you can see that those increases range from 0 to 5 to up somewhere around 20%. Maybe as a preemptive strike for Brandon, you have a contract with them where you're only allowed to raise their rates every other year, so those increases are always going to be 0 in the off years. For Harrisburg, as the new customer, we're starting to carry their rates. We went through a pretty aggressive cost of service analysis last year to consider Harrisburg, and this is the results of that analysis. One of the questions that came up in past years that was always very interesting to the City Council that we wanted to present to you this evening was why are we recommending a rate adjustment for 2010? So you can see that for the range of increases that we proposed for 2010, in the lower box, we're going to see an increase projected of about $2.7 million. And if we look at the basic need for those increases, it's about half debt service, or a little bit less than half, and about half operation and maintenance expenses. Now, I also have a note on there that talks about how we're refilling the stabilization fund for this particular utility. We did look at those increases over a 2-year period because we are anticipating a pretty significant deficit in spending in 2009, which is part of the evolution of the rate model. You can also see then of that $2.7 million where those percentages fall, and I guess the biggest chunk being wages, salaries, and benefits, and then a range of other activities that happen within the water reclamation utility. This is the graphic that I always affectionately term the Cotter graphic. He was looking for a graphic several years ago to best show how to put all of this into perspective. And so we have dollars on the y-axis, and we have time in the x-axis. You can see there's the different increases that we had historically, the 19 and the 18, proposed for 16, and then you can see that we're anticipating more inflationary increases in the out years. The blue is the restricted funds that you have that are EPA mandate. The green are the unrestricted reserves that you have. You can see that as we use the blue, we're not replenishing them as aggressively. It was decided philosophically by the city that rather than going beyond the EPA mandate for the blue, that we would simply fill up the unrestricted, and we could always use that at your discretion. And so we're only filling the blue up to the degree the EPA requires that, and we're putting all of their other reserve requirements into the green. The different targets then, the lowest one has to do with the operating reserve balance, which is 90 days for this utility. The brown then is the target operating plus a rate stabilization reserve balance that we put in place to help smooth some of the edges, desiring to be more of an inflationary increase type utility once we got ahead of the curve. And then lastly, the final balance also brings in the unrestricted reserve balance that we wanted to have within the utility. So you can see in this case that we're getting, in 9 we were expecting a deficit, in 10 and 11 we're meeting both of the lower balance thresholds. We don't meet the upper balance threshold until somewhere between 12 and 13. Inflationary increases allow us to generate some extra revenue in the out years as reflected by the green graphs being above the red line. and then ultimately in 16, we're coming into kind of a smooth landing for this particular utility. If we change from where are the incremental costs going to where are the total costs going for the water reclamation utility, for a 2010 preliminary operation and maintenance budget of $8.3 million, this pie chart demonstrates where those costs will be borne within your water reclamation utility, with over half being wages, salaries, and benefits, and then the other range of activities happening with utilities being the second largest cost within that water reclamation. One of the other items that's become quite familiar for the City of Sioux Falls is a comparison of where you stand in the region. The 2009 annual regional rate survey that A2S does has not been published yet, but we did accelerate the information that we received from all of the members or all the utilities in 2009 in order to make this presentation this evening. So what you see here are the towns on the left side, and then their monthly utility bill should they use 7,500 gallons of wastewater. The dark graphic indicates whether it's the minimum component of their bill. The green proportion reflects how much of it's volumetric. And you can see that in Sioux Falls' case, you land somewhere between the third and the 40th percentile. And should you adopt the rate increase that we're recommending and no one else across the region do a rate increase in 2010, you can see that you'd go from about the 40th percentile to closer to the 55th percentile. Now, I'm pretty confident when I present to you next year at this time that you'll be closer to that 40th percentile again, as most of the other utilities raise their rates in some fashion. We just can't anticipate those at this time. Looking at the Cotter graphic then for residential presented as a table and looking solely at residential, you can see that this utility, when we first came to you, was in the need of some pretty significant rate increases. You as a council have adopted those significant rate increases. We're recommending 1 year of that double-digit rate increase again, and we're pretty confident that moving forward we should be down to more of an inflationary increase moving forward, which was the long-term objective of this utility. In terms of the bottom line, as it relates to just water reclamation, should a customer in your utility use 7,500 gallons of water on a monthly basis, and I know this is somewhat arguable because it's what we use across the region, and so it's the benchmark that we use. Some are higher, some are lower. You can see that your 2000 monthly charge would be $23.51. If we have a 16% increase, that'll raise to $3.77 to $27.28 just for the water reclamation utility. And we do review these rates annually in terms of making this justification. That concludes the presentation for the water reclamation utility. Trent and I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Looks like you're going to get off the hook easy here.
Somebody quipped when I walked in that I had 2 briefcases, and does that mean I was going to make it short? And maybe that is a harbinger of things to come.
I thought maybe you brought your overnight kit. Very good. Well, I guess we'll see you this evening then.
Well, I think I have to do the second one on
second
water
part as well?
purification,
Okay,
too.
I saw Randy getting up there, so I didn't know if he was going to toss you out or not.
Randy Jansen, Water Superintendent.
Very good.
Randy will be providing a similar flanking as Trent did, only for water purification this time. Very similar in terms of the water wastewater utility and the way that we've done the work over the years. In this case, this particular rate study was done in 2005 versus 2006, so 1 year earlier. Again, it had a cost of service and a revenue adequacy model or component to it. We want to make sure we have sufficient revenue and we have equitability, and we've been helping you on an annual basis through updating the model. If we look backwards to your performance in 2008, here you can see that this was a year, and I'm not sure if it had to do with being a little bit wetter. I'm not sure if it had to do with some of your conservation steps working as you were desiring, but you can see that the amount of revenue that you brought in from an operating perspective was quite a bit lower, almost kind of a surprise in 2008, and so that's something that we had to react to. You also have some platting fees that you bring in for the water utility, and with a little bit slower growth within Sioux Falls, you can see that those platting fees were a little bit lower, much like Trent did in Water Rec. We saw Randy react in a progressive way to make sure that he kept everything in balance, and so he managed his operating expenses very proactively. In his case, he had a little bit of flexibility on the capital outlay as well, and the net result, even though we saw quite a bit of shortfall in operating revenue, was actually a positive gain for the unrestricted cash balance within the utility. Looking forward then, much like water reclamation, we did also need then to look at all of the different new inputs to the model. We inputted the preliminary budget for 2010 and beyond, as well as the capital. We adjusted the plating fees to reflect those changes that we saw in 2008. We also looked at the revenue projections and downgraded those quite significantly as a base for 9, given the lower revenues that we saw in 2008. Your water utility also was fortunate enough to get a couple stimulus loans with the 10% principal reduction. It's going to result in just short of $1 million of savings over the course of those loans. And then as a reminder, which I don't know how much of a reminder you need, but it appears like Lewis and Clark will be ready to serve Sioux Falls by 2012, and your water utility has anticipated buying 5.5 million gallons per day from the utility, both as a contractual requirement as well as a means to forego some of the capital improvements within your water distribution system on the south end. So it's kind of a dual strategy. If we look at the projected rate increases for 2010 moving forward, we're looking at 14% increase for residential, flow, and meter. These are the same numbers that Mark quoted to you. In this utility, we also have some other users. We have commercial, we have industrial, and then we have Lincoln County and Lewis and Clark itself in terms of buying some water to wheel to other communities. And you can see the resulting increases that we have based on the cost of service. Maybe once again, on a preemptive strike basis, Lincoln County and Lewis and Clark are obviously part of Lewis and Clark, and a pretty big portion of our costs has to do with Lewis and Clark itself. And so one of the principal reasons why we're not raising Lincoln County's and Lewis and Clark rates as aggressively as we are the others is they're paying for their Lewis and Clark share under a different, through a direct format, so it's not fair to charge them for ours as well. Then too, you can see, I guess, on the right side, we had to pick, in this case, you have a variety of meter sizes. We picked the smallest meter size, but you can see what the cost would have been in 2009, and then what the cost would be with the increase in 2010 for each of the user classes across their utility. Similarly then, to address the possible question of where the increases are going, much like the water reclamation utility, the increase for this year with the rates we propose is about $2.75 million. In this case, it's about half operation and maintenance, about a quarter debt service, and about a quarter going directly to Lewis and Clark for your long-term water supply alternative. If we then look at what those incremental costs are for your utility, quarter is about wages, salaries, and benefits, a quarter utilities, a quarter supplies and materials, mostly chemicals, I would guess, and the rest is between professional services, repair and maintenance, and other. Moving then to the cartographic, in this case, the brown that you have is the operating balance that we're trying to maintain. The green is the bond payment that we're making to Lewis and Clark. And then we do have a rate stabilization fund that we've recommended to this utility. But we've recommended that rate stabilization fund only be aggressively funded once you have settled into your Lewis and Clark debt payments. The reason for that is we felt that was a pretty significant step for the utility already, and we didn't want to add insult to injury. You can see on the dotted line are the increases that we've had historically and those increases that were projected moving forward. We are projecting 14% increases through 2013, after which we'd have a moderate increase in 2014, and then we are projecting inflationary increases in 15 and 16. You can see in this particular utility that we're having to do some manipulation with the cash in order to get through some of the lean years, but we do see a pretty nice soft landing as we approach those years out in 15 and 16. Then from the green, you can see at the Lewis and Clark, remember we did a bond in which we did interest only for the initial 6 years to take some of the pain away from the utility. Those are those initial green bars through 2012. Your full principal and interest payments based on the rest of the amortization begin in 2013, and they carry on until well beyond 2016. Looking at then the total expenditures for the water utility and where those come from, about a $14.1 million operation and maintenance utility, with the biggest chunk being wages, salaries, and benefits. Again, supplies and materials, i.e. chemicals and utilities, are the other two major components of this particular utility. We also accelerated the completion of the regional water graphic for this particular utility, in this case, it's just for surface water systems or systems that use both surface water and groundwater. You can see that Sioux Falls still has relatively low water rates compared to the region, somewhere less than the 25th percentile. If you were the only one to raise your rates and accept our recommendation to raise at 14%, you can see you'd be somewhere around the 35th percentile in terms of systems across the region. Once again, I would expect that you'll fall closer to the top of this graph in the long term once other utilities raise their rates in 2010. This shows, once again, the history just for residential, and we are in a trend of double-digit rate increases, some for operation, some for debt service, and then the relatively large chunk for Lewis and Clark as well. If we look at the impact for a typical user of 7,500, the increase would be about $3.55 if you accept the 14% increase for residential customers in 2010. And once again, we will be reviewing these rates annually for you. Because water and wastewater are so closely tied and you're using the same cash register or water meter, we did combine. And so if a customer used 7,500 gallons of water within the community in 2010, it would be an increase of about $7.32 for both water purification and water reclamation. This concludes my presentation. Oh, I do have one more graphic. Excuse me. We did also then look at a combined graphic. In this case, you've asked us historically to do this more in the state of South Dakota. These are the larger South Dakota systems greater than 5,000. And you can see if you're the only utility to raise your water, wastewater, and stormwater rates in 2010, where you'd fall in comparison to the other utilities in South Dakota that are as close in size as they can be to Sioux Falls. That concludes my presentation for water purification. Once again, Randy and I would be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Costello.
On page 20 of your presentation, where you've got a summary of the new revenue generated and where it goes to,
okay.
The 28% debt service, that's the primarily the Lewis and Clark, but I mentioned there's other things on there as well.
Well, I looked at that as I was saying. I'm sure that that's actually debt service and capital funded through rates. And so I would think Lewis and Clark, the 23% would be the slice that was going to debt repayment for the Lewis and Clark bond.
That's the $70 million.
That's the $70 million repayment of the bond. The 28%, which in hindsight I guess is you never see these things till they get up here, but is mislabeled a little bit, would be any improvements that you're doing with cash in your utility, as well as those SRF loans and some of those types of things.
Okay. And then can we go back to the water rec too? The purchase of the land for the treatment facility later on down there, I think it was 2011.
When it was cashed instead of bonded?
Right.
Okay.
What was the original, was that an SRF loan, or was that going to be an additional bond that we were going to do, or is?
No, we didn't use SRF.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe so everybody can hear, the response was that SRF will not allow land to be one of the elements, and so it would have had to be either a cash or a revenue bond.
Okay.
Mr. Jameson.
Could you help me understand the process with the rate increases dropping off for the rec program next year? I think it is. They drop down to, what, 2 or 3%, but then with the water purification, it goes out till the 14. Help me again understand why that we're asking such large increases until that point, and then we drop way down to the 2%.
Is there two parts, if I may? Are there two parts to the question? One is why so drastic, and then the other is why such wide separations between the two?
Well,
why such wide differences between water and water reclamation?
Not so much. Just if you could just address each one individually.
Well, this is always a difficult question to answer. We rarely get hired to do comprehensive rate studies unless the utility has sensed that maybe there's going to be some issues that they need to address. And so when we tackled the water reclamation rate increase rates, it was at a time where they were using their cash kind of more aggressively, pretty aggressively. And so as they looked toward the future and some of the things that needed to be done with the rapid growth, it was recognized that there would need to be some pretty significant increases. But the neat thing in that utility, because it's smaller, is if we did those aggressive rate increases and did those for a number of years, we should be able to get to a point where we would raise rates more on an inflationary basis, and that was the goal. I've seen some utilities drop that down to zero The danger in that is that people, when you say we're not going to have a rate increase, kind of use that as the litmus test. Did they raise my rates or didn't they? Well, in reality, almost every year that your labor costs are going up, your chemical costs are going up, your utility costs are going up. We're kind of in an unusual year in some things this year. So as a result, we have kind of a paradigm that we like to recommend to our clients where they try to use inflation as the healthy benchmark rather than a zero. And so the initial rate increases were necessary because of operating increases and probably to a larger extent, capital requirements within the water reclamation utility, after which time we recommended raising rates on an inflationary basis and trying to keep that balanced over time. For the water utility, it was similar. You're seeing operating increases. You're seeing increases in your capital program, but probably as importantly in that utility, you have that 800-pound gorilla in terms of the Lewis and Clark, and it was determined by the City of Sioux Falls that if you kept growing at the rate you're growing and you superimpose that growth on the sustainability of your groundwater and your surface water supplies, that you were by 2012, in the event of a drought, very likely to run out of a sustainable water supply. And so you joined Lewis and Clark initially. You actually retained our firm to do a long-term study of whether that amount of water that you had from Lewis and Clark was adequate. The result of that study was that we recommended that you significantly increase the amount of water that you were purchasing from Lewis and Clark. And the $70 million bond, which netted about $64.281 in net bond proceeds to Lewis and Clark, was your prepayment to ensure that you had a long-term sustainable water supply. And that it's $3 million in annual debt service right now, and that ramps up to $4.5 million when the principal and interest kick in 2013.
Mr. Brown.
Greg, the short answer to it is that prior to Mark Cotter hiring Mr. Burrian, some of the rates hadn't been increased in 10 years, and so we were getting behind.
Short answer.
Should use that answer.
Other questions of Steve? Mr. Staggers.
Yeah, Steve, when you do these cities and the comparisons, we have many cities that are the same for the wastewater, and then we have many that are the same for the surface water, but we also have many that are not. Is there a better way just to try to just come up with the same cities for wastewater and the same cities for surface water, so we can get a better comparing apples and apples, instead of having some cities in the wastewater and then other cities in the surface water?
Councilor Staggers, certainly at your direction, we have all of the data to present everything uniformly, or we have the data to present it the way we did. Just for edification, the reason we chose to do it the way we did is that you have a mechanical wastewater plant rather than lagoons. If we compare you to lagoon systems, we are really comparing apples to oranges, and I would guess that some of the water systems that have surface water may be lagoon systems. Similarly, on the water systems, if you have surface water, it's much more elaborate to treat the surface water with its potential for pathogens than it is groundwater, and so we've done those comparisons. If you desire, we could make it all uniform next year or show both approaches. All of that data is at our fingertips.
Yeah, that would be good, because just to get a better, sense of how we compare with other cities that are, really more like us, and instead of having a lot of other new cities coming, like there was this one city I'd never even heard of before, Hermantown, Minnesota. It's probably a nice community, but it's not in the mechanical wastewater, but it is in the surface, and we could just have this, take a look at the same cities in both areas.
Yeah, duly noted. Thank you.
Mr. Costello.
I'm not sure if I understood that correctly, but I would expect that we would be comparing ourselves to communities that have similar water treatment facilities and similar wastewater treatment facilities. And I would think the important thing would be is to make sure that we have the same cities year to year, so we can compare ourselves that way. But, if there's a difference in the way that they treat it, which is, I think what Steve had said, is there's a significant cost difference, I'm not sure that that's relevant. I'd like to see us compared to the same system, the same cities that use the same similar process every year.
That's what I was saying, yes. That's right, that's what I was saying.
Well, I guess, if I may, Councilor Staggers and Councilor Costello, the only reason that there would be new names coming in one year or not is that when you send out a survey, some people are going to respond and some don't. We make a very special effort on the larger clients or the ones that are going to be very comparable to call them, but in some cases, Duluth, for instance, didn't like the fact that they were always the highest on the list and just decided that they weren't going to submit this year for that reason, whereas Hermantown, as a surface water system, elected to. And so we have elected to benchmark on surface water systems and mechanical wastewater plants. But if you were interested in one that showed up here, what their overall comparison is, we certainly have that information, but I'd caution you that you might start comparing yourself against a lagoon wastewater or a relatively inexpensive groundwater to treat or something like that.
Mr. Jameson.
All right, this might be a little funny question, but you did the rate study, right, for the water? You did all the rate studies?
Well, I had a team of people working with me, but I was participated in them.
Just in general, in your opinion, what would be the number one thing that all of us in the city could do to keep our rates as low as possible? What could we do collectively to lower the rates? I mean, just use less water? Would that be just the bottom line? Or you get such an overhead with the system you've got in place, if we all cut down our water usage, would we?
I don't have, this is going to sound terrible, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I would guess that your variable cost of production is relative. I think we calculated one time it was like 30 cents per 1,000 gallons. So although it's very prudent for you to use less water from a conservation mandate, I would almost without exception guess that your cost will go up on a unit volume basis as a result of that lowered production, which will drive your rates up. Their bill might go down if they don't use as much water, but if their unit volume rate will likely have to go up as a result of that because most of it's fixed. Probably the single biggest cost of your utility and all utilities across the region, to answer your question, is going to be capital. And so, prudent management of your capital improvements plan is going to be the best way to manage rates. And I don't say that to try to chop the capital plan, but that's the part to spend the most attention to if you want to manage rates proactively.
Other questions to Steve? Well, very good. Are you done then, Steve?
If you're done, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight. Will we see you tonight as well?
Yep.
Very good. Okay, that concludes our presentations here. Does anybody have anything for the greater good? Oh, are you going to speak now, Mike?
Mike Burkhardt, Light Superintendent.
Sorry, Mike. Didn't mean to rush you out of here, but...
Chad Rasmussen with DGR. We're going to cover the electric light department. Similar format, I guess. Got some things that are unique to the electric system, though, is very much different than the water and water rec departments. I'd like to first start off by showing you a territory map for the city light department electric system. Okay, the light department is unique from some of the other departments in who it serves. It doesn't serve all of Sioux Falls. Okay, the light department does serve all of the street lights in Sioux Falls, but they have a very distinct service territory that is shown in green on the graph there. The yellow area is Xcel Energy. It serves the bulk of the community. The blue area is Southeastern Electric that serves the north outskirts of this community, and the south area there is, the blue is Sioux Valley, and then the pink area is Southeastern Electric. So with that, the City Light Department serves about 2,600 customers. 2,100 of those are private accounts, and 500 of those are governmental accounts. The 10 largest customers, just to give you some review, the water purification plant, the City of Sioux Falls School District, the Air Guard, Lakeside Dairy is a large private customer, Convention Center, Sheridan Sioux Falls, Washington Pavilion, the Costello Terminal at the airport, Law Enforcement Center, and the arena. And approximately half the electricity provided by the light department is to public entities. Okay, so your mix is very different than a lot of other electric utilities. Okay, this graph or chart, I guess, is intended to give you a flavor for the mix of power that you're supplying to your customers. Something that's really, really big right now is renewable energy, as well as some of the talk about climate change, et cetera. So we wanted to show you from your power suppliers where they get their power and the power that you pass on to your customers. The 44.5% of hydro is what was talked about being supplied by WAPA. There's base power is from WAPA off the dams of Missouri. And then the rest of those pieces of the pie are supplied by Heartland Consumer Power District. Adam spoke before. About 15% of that part of your power supply is from coal, 13% from nuclear, 8.5% from wind, and 19% from other sources, primarily natural gas, some diesel generation as well. So you do have a very healthy portfolio of renewable energy as well as a very diverse mix of power being supplied to your customers. Okay, this chart is intended to show you of the costs for the city light department, what makes up every component there. The vast majority, as you see there, 65% or almost two-thirds is directly attributed to power supply. So what you pay to WAPA and to Heartland for purchasing power is 65% of your overall cost of the electric utility. About 14.5% of depreciation on the utility plant, 8% personnel, and then some smaller pieces of the pie there as well. So really, by and large, power supply has the largest impact to the electric utility. This is another chart that kind of shows the same information as the previous pie chart, except in bar form, and also shows that same information for a 5-year period. As you can see there, by far and away, again, the power supply costs are the big dollar item, and depreciation, personnel, and so on are much smaller in comparison. If you look at cost increases on a year-to-year basis, the power supply cost has been going up, and been going up at a pretty healthy clip. And that's something that's really out of your control. The other areas there are really staying pretty flat. Okay, so as we took that information in, did the similar type of analysis that Steve went through on the water and wastewater side, we crunched the numbers and came up with we need an increase of rates for 5% in 2010 electric system. I think the projection was 4%. As previously mentioned, it is up slightly. WAPA is increasing their rates for 2010 13%. Heartland is increasing their rates 10%. So actually 5% is quite a bit less than what they're raising their rates, and we'll get into the reason for that a little bit later. Again, just to mention, the light department's rates are cost-based, as are power suppliers' rates. And we're proposing that those increases would be applied to all rate classes. This table is just to give you a feel for how each type of customer would be impacted on your system, broken out by types of customers there. The far right-hand column, after the 5% rate increase, for a residential customer, looking at about $2.23 a month increase. Small commercial, a little over $10 a month. Large commercial, $83 a month, and large commercial with an average load factor of $92 a month. Excuse me. Okay, in 2009, one item that we took a closer look at was the appropriate reserve level for the light department. The original goal, when we started looking at this back in 2004, was that we would have enough reserve capacity to handle 180 days or 6 months of operating. As power supply costs have continued to increase quite dramatically over the past few years, we've kind of taken a step back and said, do we really need that much reserve since the bulk of our cost increases are due to power supply costs? So we took a look, made a comparison to other city enterprise funds, and we also made an assessment of the risk to the city of failure of large pieces of equipment like a substation transformer, and we said we think 90 days is enough. We think we can cut that in half. That brings us to a level of about $2 million, which actually back in 2004 was that same target, $2 million. And that's actually where we're at today with the reserve level. So we think that reserve level is where it should be now. And going forward in the future, we'd like to see it stay at that same level. Looking into the future beyond 2010, the current estimates indicate an increase in 2011 of about 10%. And we're then hopeful that rates would stay flat for 1 or 2 years. It's all going to be kind of dependent on what happens with power supply. But in talking to power suppliers, this is kind of what we're projecting at this time. In 2014, we're kind of showing about another 10% increase. One point I'd like to make and make it clear is that this projection does not account for any impact due to possible cap-and-trade legislation due to carbon. That's something that's been talked about a lot, both on the federal stage as well as the state stage here in South Dakota. As many of you may know, the state PUC did a study recently, talked to many different utilities about some of the proposals that are out there on the federal stage, and the results of their study showed that in average South Dakotan, by 2015, the rates would go up almost 50% if some of those cap-and-trade proposals went through. So that's something to keep in all the back of our minds, be cognizant of. If that goes through, that is going to have a serious impact on electric rates. Okay, and this is a graph, I guess comparable to some of the previous ones here that shows the estimated operating reserves in the green bars there. The red line is the targeted operating reserves. So as you see, 2009 and beyond, we're right at the $2 million level, which is where we want to be. And then the blue line shows the average rate increases on the residential side to keep those reserve levels at that point. So again, 2010 we're looking 5%, 2011 10%, 2012 and 13 0%, and 2014 about 9%. A comparison with other area utilities. This shows how you stack up against your neighbors, other people serving customers in and around Sioux Falls. On the residential side, small commercial and large commercial side, Sioux Valley Energy shown in yellow, XL Energy shown in blue, and the city shown in green. So as you can see there, depending on which rate class you're in, a little under, a little above, but very comparable to your surrounding utilities. And this graph is, I guess, an attempt at showing some of the same information as the other utilities are showing, but basically it's trying to break out the reason for the increase in additional revenue that's needed by the increased rates. And it really boils down to, on the electric side, the increase in power supply costs, which is in the O&M expenses. As I mentioned before, WAPA, Heartland are actually increasing 10% and above on the power side, but the city light department actually is using a little less money in 2010 than in previous years. So the operating expenses is a negative number here. So the net amount then is $325,000. That's what we need to make up with the 5% rate increase. And I think that's our last slide. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions, Chad? Mr. Costello?
Mike, would it be possible for you to blow this up a little bit and email it to us, this map that shows the service area for the city, what we use?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. And then would either one of you be able to respond to this? It's probably not fair to ask you, but it seems like a couple of years ago we were told that some of the rate increases that we were getting from WAPA, and it seems to me that they were fairly significant, were because of the low water flows. And now that has returned to a more normal capacity or flow, but we're still seeing a significant increase from WAPA?
We're hopeful that those are going to level off, the increases. But from what I understand, WAPA is so far behind, I guess, due to the excessive droughts they've had over the past 5 years. They're still catching up.
Yeah, actually, the 13% next year, a lot of us, they didn't foresee back in when the drought first started back in 2000 or 2001. They took out bonds, the Western Area Power did, and now all the payments are starting to come due in 2010 and 2011, and that's why they're going to raise these rates up now and start paying off them bonds.
Other questions, Chad? Very good. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you tonight. Next up, we have the Sioux Falls Regional Sanitary Landfill with Matt Evans and Dave McElroy.
Dave McElroy, Sanitary Landfill Superintendent. Tonight we have with me Matt Evans from R.W. Beck, and I'll let him go ahead and lead the presentation, and I'll assume a flanking position.
Thank you, Dave. Again, it's Matt Evans with R.W. Beck, and I'll be talking about our the result of our 2010 tipping fee analysis that we completed. And to begin with, I just want to clarify a couple terms that we're going to use. The tipping fees that I'm talking about are just the waste disposal fees at the landfill that are charged for bringing in municipal solid waste or construction demolition debris, along with some of the other waste items that are accepted there. And municipal solid waste is just your residential garbage, your normal garbage that goes into the main part of the landfill, and I'm going to be calling that MSW to shorten it. And construction demolition debris will be referred to as C&D waste. And those two make up about 80% of the tipping fee revenues that come into the landfill from waste fees, from tipping fees. And for this year, we're recommending no increase in MSW and C&D tipping fees. So they will remain at where they are now, which is $32 per ton for MSW and $30 per ton for C&D. Out of area waste, which is waste outside the 5-county region of Lake, Lincoln, Minnehaha, McCook, and Turner counties, those receive a higher tipping fee of $96.50, and that's because the city's not interested in taking waste from outside of those areas. It's a landfill for this area, this region. All right, this is a similar benchmarking study that we've done over past years. As you can see, for MSW, it's in the lower third of the region. This is about a 100-mile or thereabouts region that we've been looking at over the last several years. And then with C&D waste, we're more in the middle. With respect to the other regional landfills in the same area. All right, and when we did the benchmarking study, we also asked the landfills what the impact of the downturn in the economy has been on them, and the surrounding these landfills said that there's been a slight decrease in waste receipts, about 2 to 3%. For both MSW and C&D. Now at Sioux Falls, C&D receipts has been down closer to 20% through April, and this is just down because of construction activities was down. However, MSW tipping fee or tonnage coming in is actually up about 2% through April, so that has continued to come in. And so the increase in MSW has balanced some of the decrease in C&D receipts, as well as the landfill gas pipeline project of the Poet ethanol plant. We started operation of that at the end of February, which was a few months ahead of where we were budgeting it for it to begin. So that helped weather the storm, so to speak, as well as the revenues that we've received from carbon credits, which the Public Works Department and Mark Mickelson have been in here before and talked to you about. Those two things have helped weather the effects of the downturn and the C&D loss. All right, and what I was going to do next here is talk a little bit about what goes into the tipping fees, what generates this, how we come up with the rates, and we look at revenues and expenses with that. And with the revenues, this year was about $9.5 million of revenues coming into 2009. And when I'm talking about what's coming into the landfill or how we're generating the rates, I'm looking at just 2009. But I want to be clear that when we're doing these reviews, we're looking at future years as well. But just to give you some information and a feel for what goes into the rates, I'm just going to talk about 2009. And as you can see, the largest portion of the revenue comes from the MSW receipts, and then C&D from your commercial haulers. That generates about 20% of the revenue. And then other fees, including C&D flat rates, which is for your residential customers who get charged at the per vehicle price. Those make up about 8%. And then carbon credits and landfill gas sales are making up about 10% of the revenues for 2009. And then interest off of the money in the bank makes up about 3%. And I should also point out that the carbon credit revenues are actually for credits generated in 2008, and that's because it takes about a year to get the credits verified and sold, so they show up in 2009. And then the other piece that goes into it is expenses. And we have unrestricted and restricted cash balances in the landfill. The unrestricted cash balances goes towards O&M expenses, the majority of the construction projects, as well as loan payments and other capital improvements or capital equipment purchases. And the restricted cash balance is the requirement of the state that we have to have for closure activities, for closing a landfill cell once it reaches its capacity. You have to have that money set aside. And also interesting in 2009 is that our expenses are around $10,300,000 for this, which is larger than what we're bringing in for revenue this year, and that's because it's a large construction year out at the landfill. The most variable piece of the expenses graph is the CIP, the capital improvement projects, due to the nature of the construction activities at the landfill. And also in expenses, we're transferring about $1,100,000 from the unrestricted this year into the restricted cash to fund those closure activities per the requirements of the state. So what goes into that most variable piece, the capital improvement plans, projects, the construction projects? For both unrestricted and restricted expenses this year, the CIP projects that are going on out at the landfill in 2009 is a new cell construction, which is the largest piece, as well as expansion of the leachate and landfill gas extraction system, pond construction, and a few other, and several other construction activities that are going on out there. And also, I wanted to touch on cash reserve. Our target cash reserve out there is about $2,700,000 in unrestricted cash balance, and right now we have that in our unrestricted pool. So we have the cash reserve, and that's about 6 months of O&M expenses for the landfill, and that we've looked at as how it compares to industry standard, as well as on an individual basis. We've looked at if that's the right amount for us, and that's what we've come to is a good amount, is about 6 months of reserves. Just to give you historically what we've been doing with rates to remind you or bring how we got to where we're at. In 2006, we increased to $24.50, and we've stepped that up to $32 per ton for MSW. And going forward next year, we hope to not have another. We're not planning on an increase at this time. Depending on how things go, I guess we could be looking at most maybe $1 increase next year. So the bottom line for the landfill, no increases this year. We keep it at $32 and $30 per ton for MSW and C&D respectively, and keep the out-of-area rates at $96.50 per ton. And Dave and I would be happy to take any questions.
Questions of Matt? Mr. Staggers.
Yeah. First of all, let me say I'm glad you're not increasing the rates. But during this economic downturn, to try to send a good message to the citizens, has there been any thought of maybe reducing this?
Well, I think we were, last year when we did this presentation, we were projecting $1 increase at $33. So we're actually under where we're at, and we're maintaining where we were projecting it at, and I think it's on target with what we were expecting.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. See you tonight. Next up, we have Sioux Falls Street and Utilities, and Galen Hubers is going to do the presentation. Galen.
Good afternoon, Galen Huber, Street Utility Manager. I do have a wingman, too. He's sitting right back there, Chad Heavey, City Engineer. I work very closely with his division on trying to put together a proactive street maintenance program, and his department supports me greatly. So he is my wingman here tonight. Section 38-31 of the city ordinance states that it's the front foot assessments for street maintenance is what it's entitled. And what it is, it's on an annual basis, requires the city council by resolution to authorize the county to collect front foot assessment for the city of Sioux Falls. The assessment is used for the purpose of maintaining or repairing streets. And this is historical data on the cost of asphalt. This year, our per ton cost is $41.93. You can see that it's got a gradual trend line of increasing as the years go on. This front foot assessment also helps pay for snow removal during the winter months, which is a major part of my winter program. And as you can see, the cost of both salt and liquid chemical has increased as the years have progressed. 2008 is a little bit of an anomaly. That bid came in with the cost of fuel at about over $4 a gallon, and I believe that's why you see the spike in 2008. But if you take a look at the trend line, it's generally increasing each year as far as costs go. This assessment is collected on all frontages, less city and county-owned frontages, and no private streets are part of this assessment. In April of 2004, an internal study was completed to determine whether a rate adjustment was needed to offset increasing costs. From 1996 to 2004, the front foot assessment was maintained at 50 cents. This assessment came back, and it was determined at that time to increase the street front foot assessment 10 cents per year for 5 years. In 2005, the front foot was raised to 60 cents, and on January 1st of this year, 2009, the fifth and final year, the front foot was raised to $1, which is the current rate that we have this year. It has been 5 years since the last study, and without a current revenue and expense study, it would be inappropriate at this time to recommend an increase for 2010. We recommend that the street front foot assessment for 2010 remain at $1 per front foot, and during 2009, an internal study will be initiated to make recommendations for the 2011 fiscal year. Any questions?
Yeah, Galen, just to clarify, what did you say about private streets in the
That's not part of this assessment.
Okay, not part of this assessment. Okay.
Right.
Are they assessed on frontage for?
Wingman. Do you know the answer to that question?
Brad Voss at Office of Public Works. When a private street touches the public street, that is assessed to front footage. So if it's a 65-foot wide street, they get assessed on 65 feet.
And 65 feet. So the association of those neighbors then get together and pay it. Is that how
Yes.
it works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, another question I have too. We're focusing a lot on this frontage tax, but also in the past, the second penny has been important for streets. And from time to time, we ask the question, how much is the second penny minus debt payment going for the streets? Do you happen to have any percentage?
I can tell you what the front foot assessment, how much that revenue that creates.
Yeah, but as far as the second penny?
As the last graphs that we've shared with you for the capital plan, because second penny is for capital improvements to the city of Sioux Falls. Last year was approximately 65% went toward highways and streets.
And also, I think that included interest and all that
Debt.
kind of stuff?
That's correct. Because one of the key aspects and one of probably a very good investment that was made into the core part of the city was the storm drainage improvements, and that is a part of that collection. Okay.
But as far as just the straight streets, that we're spending this year in 2009, minus all the debt and all that other stuff, how much are we actually spending from the second penny on the streets?
That's a part of the street. I don't have the engineering and street CIP with me, but we can certainly bring that to you for second reading.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks,
Okay.
Mark.
Any additional questions for Galen?
Galen, I have a question for you. You've given us the part of what the money goes for with asphalt and the cost of chemicals for snow removal. Is it possible to break down in more detail than that, just those two items, or give us more components that are involved?
That's exactly what I'm doing right now for this internal study. I've already started generating information for this internal study to determine what we're going to charge in 2011, breaking it down more specifically to what it costs.
Okay, so
based on front foot assessment.
And when will that, do you think, be
I'm
completed?
working with Chad Heavey's engineering division, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll have something put together for that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Galen or any of the other presentations made today?
Just every year we put together just one summary slide that does show the impacts to a typical residential home, and so we've broken those out respectively. Again, the light department does not serve every residential customer, and so it's footnoted accordingly. The approximate increase for sewer will be $3.77. Water will be $3.55. Again, from a tipping fee perspective, no increase is recommended for sanitary landfill, which gives an adjusted increase of $7.32. And then again, as Galen highlighted, we are not at this point making a recommendation to raise the frontage fee, and we would conduct that detailed assessment. I think our takeaway is that we hope that we've been able to answer your questions. I also think just with the work that the team has done and shows how the rates stack up regionally, they are very competitive, very affordable. The utilities that the customers receive are reliable. And so from working around the clock 24/7 as the plants do to make sure that when the service is requested, it's delivered, that to actually operate these utilities responsibly, these are the minimum rate increases that are needed to continue these operations. Tonight, I think our request, we obviously, you just sat through 56 slides of presentation with the now ability to web stream, that we would just highlight tonight that this is available. We are, that we would probably state what the recommended residential rates are, and that if they have any questions, they can certainly view the full presentation or call us direct. And then we are, in an attempt to condense the slide presentation down to about a 4-page booklet, our intent is to, just with the questions that were asked tonight, finalize a 4-page booklet for you and have that to you by Wednesday evening. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mark or
Yeah,
Councilor
I
Sagers?
guess my concern, Mark, is the annual increase here. I don't know if I did the math right, but it looks like it's about $175, not including the light and power, on each family in Sioux Falls. Is that a fair number I'm giving or not?
As it relates to, those are monthly increases, so the 732 times 12. And again, most of the city is not served by the light and power, and so I would, that's why that is highlighted as well. Okay.
So it's about $175 increase.
Well,
The math
it's
shows 88
Huh?
without light and power.
Yeah.
732 times 12, $87.84.
right. Is that what you're using, Counselor?
Oh, I'm sorry, I got another number in there, so, okay. Thank you.
Very good. On behalf of the team, thank you very much for allowing us to have your time, and we're certainly available this week to answer your questions.
Okay, moving on. I don't believe we have an executive session scheduled, so is there any other items for the good of the order? Councilor Staggers?
Yes, I was just wondering, do we have a timeline for our election for chair and vice chair of the city council?
I don't believe we have a timeline other than the one that under the charter, it's the first meeting in July.
Yeah, I think you actually take care of that at the end of the month.
The last meeting in June?
I think so.
So
I'll take a look at that.
That'll be next week
Yep.
then.
Councilor Knudsen?
I believe we usually do that, during one of the 7 o'clock meetings, and so it wouldn't be the very last Monday in June, it would be the one before that, is what we've traditionally done, but as long as we make the decision in June and have the new team ready to start July 1st, we're in great shape. Either way.
Yeah. In regard to the election, I was just wondering if the council was thinking about what has happened in the past when we elect a new chair, about electing a new chair where that person is not running for another office, like mayor. I know several years ago when I was on the council, that issue came up, that is it really appropriate for somebody that's running for mayor also be running for city council chair at this time? So I don't know what the rest of the council thinks. I haven't talked to anybody on that, but...
Councilor Knudsen?
Well, I'll just take a shot at this because I'm not running for mayor, but I would have to say that I really do think we have a great team up here, and I am very comfortable with, whether or not a person runs for mayor or president of the United States is fine with me as far as chairing us next year. In reality, I think that the main responsibility really is to chair the informational meetings, which really is really pretty, that any one of us could do or step in at any moment for anyone else. And, the 7 o'clock meetings, the official voting meetings, the mayor chairs those. I think he's missed one meeting in 100 years or something like that. And then once in a while, we are asked to attend a ribbon cutting or whatever as chair, but gee, we've really been good working as a team on that as far as if the chair's out of town or at work or whatever, the vice chair sits in or steps in or another counselor. So I'm very respectful of the question and anyone else's thoughts on that, but I myself do not have any concerns about any of the counselors up here who choose to run for mayor or not, being the next chair. I would expect them not to abuse that position, but I just cannot imagine that would happen.
Any other comments?
Well, yes, I guess one concern that's been expressed, Dee, I agree with what you've said there about, the chair, mostly just chairs the informational meeting, but also the chair does have a closer relationship with the mayor, meeting with the mayor on a weekly basis, and also at the same time getting information that maybe some of the other members of the city council would not get.
Councilor Knudsen?
And just to comment on that, I do agree with Councilor Staggers that the chair and the vice chairs, by tradition, have sat in on a weekly meeting for the briefing for the next week's agenda, and also for a leadership meeting with the mayor afterwards. And so I totally agree that is a regular weekly occurrence. On the other hand, I haven't been chair or vice chair for a couple years here, and have no trouble getting the information from the administration 24 hours a day, and regularly do actually get information all hours of the day. And so I really believe that, and I'd like to go a step further to say that anything that's really very new or very important, that the chair and the vice chair actually do have a responsibility to share that with the rest of us. And I think that's been working pretty well. I think that's working pretty well. Again, it's all a challenge, but that's with juggling such crazy lives outside of this job.
Any other comments on this item? Any other items? Councilor Jameson?
I think everybody got some information on the taxi cab rate increase request. Can somebody tell me why the city's involved with setting the rate for taxi cabs? Is there something I'm missing?
Yeah.
Counselor?
Yeah, we have an ordinance that fixed the prices.
Why are we, maybe this is a bad thing to ask, but why are we involved in all? I mean, we've got 2 taxi cab companies, why can't they just settle?
I totally agree with you, yes.
Councilor Brown?
I can give you some perspective. Most cities do regulate that because when you jump into a taxi cab at an airport or something, you have no control over what they might charge. And as one who has traveled quite a bit, I've experienced it when it isn't controlled. Actually, it was controlled, but this taxi cab driver was not following city ordinances. You're sort of captive as you get in there. Plus, it also serves a lot of times people who don't have vehicles, and it can be difficult for them to also afford the rates or know the rates when they get in the vehicle. And again, it's a captive audience.
Councilor Knudsen?
Well, Councilor Jameson, I'm glad that you brought up that topic because I know that there's going to be some public input this evening on that topic, and so I was actually going to say something about that too, and I totally agree with what Councilor Brown just said, that again it is in ordinance, and it's I myself think it's a good for our city council to make that determination, but I am very supportive of those numbers being reviewed at appropriate times and changed accordingly. And so I was going to ask the chair and vice chair, right now with the chair missing, or having left for a moment, is that, so is there any thought then, I mean, we've known now for a few days, a week or so, that they were going to give us some public input, but is there, so will the planning department be making a recommendation to us? I just haven't asked them that, even though I could have any time.
You know, this was not discussed in the last meeting with the mayor, and I guess I had anticipated. I've looked through these numbers, and they seem to make sense to me, but, you know, without going through a more detailed analysis, somebody's going to really have to sit down and do a little bit of research to find out if it's justified or not. I suspect it probably is, but I'm not sure that I would want to go off of the recommendations of the 2 companies involved. So I believe that the mayor will probably would take it up and assign it to the planning department or somebody in that area.
So just as I assumed, we'll of course receive the public input tonight like we do on any other topic that comes up, and then I just assume that the planning department will, and the other appropriate departments will get back to us in the near future on what they recommend we do on this issue, just like you said.
I'll try to give the mayor a heads up before the meeting and give him our
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilor Brown?
Just one other point for Councilor Jameson, that I brought forth to deregulate the limousine services. In that instance, because you have an opportunity to price those before you use those services. You don't get that opportunity with a taxi cab.
Councilor Stagger?
Well, I guess when you take a look at taxi cabs overseas in other countries, I remember when we were living in Kiev, Ukraine, before I got in the cab, I said, hey, let's negotiate this. How much is it going to be? And so it's not that the consumer is totally helpless here. Also, other cities like Washington, D.C. have rates on the side of the cab and so forth, so people know when they get in the cab. So I guess I tend to agree with you that we shouldn't be involved in this price fixing.
Councilor Jameson?
Just real quick, I don't ride a cab very much, but the last time I did was in Mexico, and that's what we did, is we negotiated the deal, Mexican dollars before we went anywhere. We made an agreement, but I just think it seems, I'm just a new guy here, but it just seems a little funny that if we've got 2 businesses competing for the same business, the market would set the value at the service, but if there was only one taxi cab company, I can understand maybe keeping control over it, but just thanks for the information.
Any other comments or topics? Seeing none, we will adjourn the informational meeting.